Welcome everyone to this open dialogue. Today, we will talk about Ukraine in deep. On February 24, 2022, Putin Russian regime troops in a criminal operation attempting to assert the right of conquest invaded Ukraine. Until then, Ukraine has been fighting to reclaim territories in the east taken by separatists funded by Putin, seeking to replicate the action of Russian mercenaries like Wagner in Crimea. This war involves not just soldiers and weapons, but also people. As of June of this year, ONRCR record 6.5 million Ukrainian refugees worldwide. I know that for some, this is just a cold number from a distance, but each one represents a story that needs to be told. Today, Tanya Rack will join us to share her history and discuss her country's courageous fight for freedom. How are you, Tanya?
Hi, Carlos, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I'm doing well. Greetings from Poland, where I'm currently recording this. How are you?
Fine, fine. Well, let's begin. Uh, February 2024. Where you been that day?
I was in Kiev. Originally, I come from eastern part of the country, but back then, I recently moved to Kiev for a job opportunity. So I woke up very early in the morning, basically from the first explosions. It was very hectic. It was very chaotic. I was not sure what to do next. So my first instinct was to call my mom and to either make her come to Kiev to reunite with her or go back to my native city. My native city is Mariupol. It's located on southern east of Ukraine.
Well, Mariupol is your home city.
Yes.
Oh, that's my God. Well, after that, you think to go to Poland or tell us all the history if you can.
Well, so it started very unpredictably for me because I think that you are facing such the atrocities as war, you are not ready for that. And initially, I had a work friend who was same paranoid as me, and there were tensions, and you could hear that there was something in the air a couple of weeks priorly to the beginning of war. So we made a kind of pact with her that if things start, we will just meet and we will be together because it would be less fearful. But everyone was here and there, and till the end, we hope that maybe nothing will still start. But just in case, we exchanged the addresses and phone numbers, and then it started. So there was an explosion, another explosion, and I started calling to my mom and my friends were all over the country, and everyone was telling me the same that explosions in their region. Because if you saw the map of Ukraine closer to the beginning of war, the country was basically in a ring of Russian troops, so that allowed them to attack from different sides. So people were reporting the same thing from Kharkiv, people were reporting the same thing from my region, and also explosions near Kiev and in northern regions. So we met with my friend. She picked me up, and we were planning to go to her place. But after that, we decided to flee. Her now husband had an apartment in western Ukraine. It was a little village, but it was like a resort. So he said that maybe we should go there. And I was still very vague because I was very worried about my family, and I was thinking about buying the ticket and going to Mariupol. But then my friend said that, okay, but think critically here because the region is located closer to the border. And if you go there, what if atrocities start there. And what if you be trapped there? And at least if you go away, you will be able to help out to your family. But if you do not, then you will be trapped together and no one will be able to help you. So I decided that, okay, I didn't have a better plan. So we went to the western part of the country. So while we were going there, it was also very stressful because, first of all, the main autobahn was bombed on that day. So we decided to take some side roads. And while we were driving, there was also a kind of village that we were passing by. And we got in a traffic jam there. And we are passing it by, and in 10 minutes, we update some news, local news, Telegram channels, and it said that it was also bombed and some people were injured, some people died. So we were just lucky that we passed that traffic jam by. And only now I understand that it was super irresponsible from me because I did not tell my mom that I'm fleeing because she did not want me to. She was worried that something might happen on the road, and she just told me just find a shelter or go to metro or something. So we came there, but I realized that I cannot stay there for a long time because my friends also had parents from the regions near Kiev that were also heavily bombed, and also there were massacres in these regions like Bucha, for example, Irpin. So everything was quite close to that, and their family members came there as well. So uh, there were like 15 people and babies and a cat in that apartment, and they understood that while they were super nice and super welcoming, it would not be a good idea to stay for me there. But I also did not know what to do because it would be quite hard to find the transport that would bring me back because most of the people were fleeing out of the city and heading westwards. So the traffic was out but not in. But what happened then was that I'm connected with the organization that is called Students for Liberty, and my fellow volunteers and friends and staffers, they started searching for me, and they told me that they activated a kind of emergency program that will help fellow activists flee from Ukraine if needed. And they asked me uh, to pass the. Yeah, sorry, I'm getting nervous when I'm telling about that too. Um, to pass the border, and that some people will come and pick me up from there. So I didn't have a better plan, and I did so. And some people came up and picked me up in Slovakia. Uh, I was thinking that we probably would stay there, but those people, they were from Czech Republic, so we went to Czech Republic, and I also did not expect that. So for the next few months, I was residing there with the family of one of my fellow activists, now friends. But what happened next is that the blockade of Mariupol started, and I totally lost connection with my mother, with my grandfather, and for almost 3 months, I did not know what was happening to them or whether they arrived or not. And meanwhile, the situation was getting worse and worse, and I was getting information about first deaths of either my acquaintances, friends, or family friends, or people who I somehow met throughout my life. And the total losses were around, that's very roughly estimated, 100,000 of people, which is 1/4 of the population of Mariupol. Later, my house was also bombed, so nothing was left there. And I was still trying to spread awareness about what was happening there because I was thinking that I could either find my family if the situation of the blockade will get more viral to the foreign community, or at least if the worst things happened, that maybe it will be possible to some family members of my friends to get out and at least some of us to reunite with them. And then luckily in 3 months I heard from my mom, It was on one morning I got a message on WhatsApp from some lady. I don't know her. She was a complete stranger, but she told me that my mom was in a queue with her in a nearby village, and she gave her my phone number on a piece of paper, and she asked her to contact me just to tell me that she is alive. But unfortunately, we lost all the property. We had several apartments downtown near the theater that unfortunately also became famous worldwide because it was bombed with kids inside. But it was the quest to get her out because there was still no connection, and I could not reach her out because the number that I had was simply blocked. And in a little while, she managed to make it to the Ukrainian side of the territory that was under Ukrainian control. And from there, I picked her up in Poland. I was planning to come back to Czech Republic, but somehow we ended up in Poland, and it's been 2 years since we moved here.
Wow, wow, wow. I'm really sorry for hear that. No, anybody is prepared for for the war. That's something that you only read in the history books. Wow, the World War Two, World War One. That's some times ago. But live in a war zone, that's horrible.
Well, unfortunately, war is not something that you can prepare yourself to, because now, from the perspective of time and when things at least settled up in my head a little bit, I also cannot fully believe that this has really happened. And it feels sometimes like if someone is asking me, like you today, about this story and they need to repeat this story, I'm feeling like it did not happen to me. Like I'm just telling the side story or the story that happened to some other person. But I think that there is a conclusion that we can draw from that. And one of the main conclusions is that, first of all, history always repeats itself. And that's why it is necessary to dig into it. And second of all, you can read about that and, conflicts, wars, whatever crashes, they happen all the time throughout the history in different parts of the world. And if you are a good human being, probably you will resonate with that and you will feel sorry for people, but you will never be able to feel that until it knocks your door. Because when it knocks your door, you start feeling that on a very deeper level, different level. And honestly speaking, I do not wish anyone to feel that just on themselves or God bless with their close ones.
Yeah. Uh, from afar, we know for Ukraine, but some piece of history, the Ukrainian independence, later the war in Donbass, Crimea, but are so many gaps in the history of Ukraine from afar. From the Dominican Republic, we know so little about the Ukraine, East Europe. You can share with us uh, are these gaps in the history for the well understanding of the on the all picture of the what happening right now.
Sure. So I would start from Ukraine's independence time. So, first of all, Ukraine was a part of the USSR, as probably the audience knows. It declared independence on August 24th. It was in 1991, and it followed a failed coup attempt in Moscow. Finally, we got the declaration that was confirmed in the referendum, and it was in December 1991. And of course, the first years, as for probably each country that is just gaining independence, they were quite unstable because there were lots of economic difficulties that we needed to solve as a country. There was political instability, and generally, there is a challenge between transitioning from a Soviet republic to a sovereign country. And then it was 2004, and we had the first revolution, the so called Orange Revolution. It happened after a disputed president election, and there happened mass protests because of that, and they led to a rerun of the election. We had two candidates. One was the pro-Western candidate, Viktor Yushchenko, who became a president after the rerun, and he beat up the pro-Russian candidate in that election, Viktor Yanukovych. But plot twist, Viktor Yanukovych returned to the power in 2010, and we had another revolution, the so-called Euromaidan. So in 2013, he rejected an association agreement with the European Union in favor of having closer ties with Russia. In the beginning, it was student protests, and the police beat up students, causing major injuries, and that also sparked the protests of broader populations, the first victims of those protests, and it grew to the Euromaidan movement. So later it was escalated in a full-scale revolution, and it led to Yanukovych fleeing the country in early 2014. And we got a new government that was led by newly elected President Petro Poroshenko. But then there was March 2014, and we got a new surprise, which was the annexation of Crimea, and also it was marked with the beginning of war in eastern Ukraine, so in my region, Donetsk region, but also in Lugansk region. So if we are speaking about the annexation, it was quite a controversial referendum, and the international community still condemns the annexation as illegal. But of course, there were also clashes in Lugansk, Donetsk region, because there were movements that were called as so-called anti-Maidan, and it was also followed to further occupation of the regions, at least some of the cities. Mariupol was going through this for a month, but then we had the re-established pro-Ukrainian forces there, and it remained to be a Ukrainian city. And since it was also a very important hub, industrial hub, we had the biggest concentration of black metallurgy there, which was also significantly contributing to the national economy and to the foreign trade of the country. And it used to be one of the biggest ports, a part of Odessa, Kherson, in Ukraine, and it could also potentially be the corridor to the Crimea. So it was the city that was strategically very important. But anyway, there started a war in Donbass, and it also led to thousands of deaths. And of course, there was a humanitarian crisis in the region. Unfortunately, there were the ceasefire agreements that were broken, known as the Minsk agreements, and parts of my region, but also Lugansk region, it became a frozen conflict zone, which still face some occasional flare-ups. However, Ukraine became more pro-Western. We deepened the ties, and we also signed the association agreement with European Union in 2014 and started receiving military aid from NATO countries. But however, there were already several regions that were destabilized, and it of course also growing the certain separatist movements. But then we are coming to the wartime. So it was February 2022, and 2 months priorly the war, the news were just bursting out with information, especially Western media, that Russia is preparing the full-scale invasion in Ukraine. And firstly, people were skeptical, especially people who were living near the front line, because probably they were pretty much used to what was happening and took the information as fake news. But I think that it had the same effect as the fabula about the boy who was running with the wolves and crying wolves, wolves, wolves. And two times never happened, but unfortunately on third time we got the full scale war, and it led to the widespread destruction. It also led to a major humanitarian crisis, power outages, and major global consequences. We have a big refugee crisis these days, but also there are substantial battles that, of course, included Kiev's defense, but also Mariupol's fall or the massacre of Bucha, the massacres in Irpin, the flooding in Kherson, the shelling in Chernihiv, and many, many other cities in different regions of the country. So this is kind of reshaping the global geopolitical alliances. So the war is currently remaining ongoing. So far, there is no clear resolution in sight. Of course, that will be majorly impacted by what will be happening in elections in other countries, including the EU countries and the US. But it is an important point in global politics with very significant implications for international security, for energy markets, and also it will make an impact to the future of NATO and EU relations.
Yeah, yeah. That's a issue that I need. I think I need to talk with you about is the Ukraine relinquish the nuclear arsenal inherited from the Soviet Union in exchange for security guarantees in the 90s. The security guarantees by United States, UK, and Russia.
Yeah, well, this is a significant document in Ukraine's post Soviet history. It is well known as Budapest Memorandum. So basically, Ukraine had to relinquish the nuclear arsenal. And I think that it was quite a mistake. But firstly, I will give you a background and context because we know that the Soviet Union got dissolved in 1991, and Ukraine, as a former Soviet state, inherited a very substantial portion of the Soviet nuclear arsenal, making it actually the third largest nuclear power in the world at that time. And that included almost 2,000 strategic nuclear warheads, but also the numerous intercontinental ballistic missiles. So you can imagine the potential. But of course, this armament is coming with international concerns. So the presence of such a large nuclear arsenal in a newly established country with political instability, with economic instability, and well, generally, if a country holds such weapons, it becomes a potential threat. So it raised significant concerns globally, especially from the states that had more power in the international scale, particularly from the United States and for Russia. So Ukraine was suggested to relinquish these nuclear weapons and instead to join the treaty on the non-proliferation of nuclear weapons and to basically become a non-nuclear weapon state. So in 1994, we are signing this document. This memorandum also got signed by Belarus, by Kazakhstan, because they were in similar situations as Ukraine regarding inheriting Soviet nuclear weapons. And yes, there were some key provisions that the memorandum guaranteed. So the key points was that in exchange for Ukraine's commitment to give up the nuclear potential and join the treaty as a non-nuclear state, the signatory countries would provide security assurances to Ukraine. So that included the respect to our sovereignty, to our independence, and also the newly established borders that were recognized by the Ukrainian constitution after the collapse of the USSR. So basically, the borders of 1991. Another thing was to refrain from the threat or use of force against Ukraine's territorial integrity, but also to support for Ukraine in event of nuclear. coercion or to refrain from economic coercion in case if that would be an attempt to subordinate Ukraine to the interests of some other states. So as we can see, didn't end up well because with all the documents signed up, we still have our territories in a threat. So Ukraine has pointed to this memorandum as recently with the war. It pointed to the memorandum as basically the evidence of the West's failure to protect the sovereignty, as promised. And of course, it also has contributed to the broader narrative of distrust in the international agreements that were established back in 90s.
Yeah, yeah. Now we're gonna talk about the man of history, a man at the moment. You know, uh, Zelensky has become the historical figure for showing unparalleled courage. The famous phrase, "I don't need a right, I need ammunition," is now associated with him. Usually, people discuss his personal journey from comedian to entering politics as an outsider with a party servant of the people. But today we want to delve into his strokes and political ideology. How would you characterize him? Pragmatic, social democratic, center right, liberal? Also, while voting is secret, did your family and you vote for Zelensky?
So I will start from the end of the question. So while I would prefer still not to disclose who we were voting for, we were not voting for him, but also to debunk the potential guesses of the audience, at least if we get some listeners from Ukraine, our candidate did not make it to the final, so it was less popular, I guess. But anyway, Zelensky political ideology can be described as centrist. His party, Sluga Narodu, which means the servant of people, positions themselves in that way. Currently, they claim to be more rooted in a strong sense of Ukrainian patriotism, but I think it is partially also determined by war because in these times the political agenda needs to seek the unity. But currently, um, currently he well when he came into office, he came with a very strong mandate to tackle corruption. This is what we could hear from most of his public speeches. And also, he was aimed to reform Ukraine's political system. What is interesting is that when his party first time came to the power and we had the elections in 2019 to the parliament, it was the first party in Ukrainian history that managed to form the mono coalition, and they got the majority of votes, which is an interesting factor in Ukraine's independent history. But of course, it is quite challenging, I guess, to bring all the principles to life that he was aiming for, because first of all, he did not have the political background. He comes from the world of show business. He was a showman, but also he was co-owning the TV channel, and he had a show, humoristic show, and he built a big media business, but also a big media persona that definitely helped him to run the elections. He used very interesting political technologies during the elections. I think that he aimed for the voters that were supposed to vote in the elections for the first time in their lives, so youth. Um, he used the TV show, which was also called Sluha Narodu, the servant of people, where he was starring himself. And that was a show about a simple teacher of history suddenly running for the office, and he had to take the post of the president. And it was showing how he was conducting the reforms and all the challenges that he was facing. And then on the new year, Instead of the greetings of the president on one of the channels where he was giving a New Year show, he said live that he is running for the office. So lots of people were uh, criticizing him because of his political style and describing him as a populist. But anyway, if it is a populism, uh, he is centering on direct communication with the people, because his background in media, his ability to kind of entertain people helps him to connect with public. He is using social media, he is using televised addresses to bypass more traditional political channels and speak directly. I think that this partially helped him to build a stronger presence on the international area of politicians, and let's say this publicity and good speaking skills also help in doing the negotiations, especially in these times when it is much needed. He's also quite pro-European and he is more pro-Western oriented. He sees Ukraine's future as a part of the European Union, but also NATO. And his pro European stance is not just a strategic choice, but it also reflects his belief in the values of freedom, and he stands for democracy. So basically, these are the values that are usually being associated with Western liberalism. So this orientation has become even more pronounced during the invasion, of course. He's quite adaptable. I would describe him as quite a resilient person. And of course, you mentioned this famous phrase, I don't need a right, I need ammunition. I think it kind of encapsulates his determination to stand with people even in extreme conditions. He also has the anti-oligarch stance, but of course, it also became kind of controversial because he's rumored to be sponsored by one of the oligarchs. His whole campaign, and it was also the person who owned the TV channel who he was cooperating with. But in any case, he is the current president of Ukraine, and I think he did not fully expect what would come to his plate during the presidency. But I think that due to him, we're still getting lots of international support, and definitely there are issues that should be um, changed in the country. But first things first, and I think that it would be possible to talk about that after the war ends.
Yeah. Now we're gonna talk about the another political parties in Ukraine.
So there are lots of parties in Ukraine. Um, to start from, there is a political party that is banned for several years. It's the opposition party. It is called the Opozicійна Платформа за життя, so like an opposition party uh, for life. It was more popular in eastern regions, and it became famous for trying to to keep ties with Russian Federation. So since the beginning
It,
of,
it's a pro-Russian party.
yes, there are lots of business ties of party members and many scandals that involve that. So now it is banned. Of course, there is also the party of the former president who lost the elections to Zelensky, Petro Poroshenko, and his European Solidarity Party. Some context of his background: he is a politician, he is a businessman, he's also an oligarch. So he served as the president of Ukraine from 2014 to 2019. He was also trying to strengthen ties with the EU and with NATO, and he was standing against the annexation of Crimea, but also the outbreak of war in Donbass. However, he was also criticized for some machinations connected to the annexation and the war in Donbass. So, anyway, I'm not going to get in depth there because these are the issues that can be talking about for hours, and we have a limited time. But um, He has the party European Solidarity Party. It is pro-European. It is pro-NATO, and it was formed as the successor to former so-called Poroshenko's bloc. This party also includes some of nationalists, military veterans, and also those who have a more tough stance on the international relations with Russia. Then another politician, it is basically a veteran politician who has served twice as prime minister of Ukraine. It's Yulia Tymoshenko and her political party Batkivshina. It is more focused on social justice, but also anti-corruption measures, uh, and also energy independence. It often includes some promises to lower energy prices, to improve social welfare, but the reputation is kind of controversial as well. There is also a person who is also a famous musician, and he is a lead singer of the band, which is known globally. It is called Okean Elzy. So, Svetoslav Vakarchuk and his party, which is named The Voice, Horus. He stepped down as a party leader in 2020, but his entry into politics was symbolized as a desire for something new, for some uncorrupted leadership, because I think that at the time people wanted to see new faces. Plus, I think that after we got the president who did not have a political background, people were more acceptable about uh, political leaders coming from some other worlds. There is also the Radical Party. There is also the Freedom, so Svoboda Party. It is more far right party, and it has roots in Western Ukraine. It historically was advocating for more nationalist policies, and it was including the promotion of Ukrainian language, preservation of our culture, of Ukrainian identity. So Ukraine's political spectrum, I would say, varies, and it ranges from pro-European liberals to far-right nationalists, and of course there are always some several shades in between. But of course, the ongoing war is also shaping the political landscape, and I think that after the war we will see more difference, and probably there will be the social demand for leaders who served in military in this war. At least I predict so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hearing you, I have the side. You tell me is right or not. That the majority of political parties now in Ukraine are centrist, so to center right.
Yes, that's true. Most
Yeah.
most of the impactful parties are.
Yeah. Um, likely pro business.
Excuse me.
Likely pro business standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, the the left lefty party are the minority now, right?
So yeah, so far yes. I think it is also partially shaped by the context of war. But we
Yeah.
will see how the situation will roll out after the end of the war.
Oh well, liberal, classic liberal in name that that's not a party that to say we are classic liberals in Ukraine. They are not.
Yeah, I mean, in the very beginning, the party of Zelensky was actually taking the libertarian stance. But now I was specifically checking their website before we went to this call with you, just to get the updated information about how they describe themselves on the website, and they say that they are centrist now. Of course, they also got lots of criticism when they firstly announced the agenda uh, and announced more economical freedom, but also the loss of, of intervention of the government on different social issues. And it is very interesting because I was also monitoring the media responses from 2019 and up to 2024, and the perception of media of course changes. but partially it is also being determined by the situation, and of course there is a matter of a kind of censorship. And I do not mean by that that all the polar opinions are being censored, but there is just a national agenda, which I think is um, is an aspect that is being taken in other countries as well if they are going through war, so that there are kind of limitations.
Yeah, that's the politics in in every world. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. The people say that. Well, now my position is that. But it's interesting that you say the rhetoric of Zelensky in the campaign was like a libertarian. That I didn't know. I didn't know that.
yeah,
I didn't
it
know that.
was, and some polls actually showed, but older polls, they were fresh after the election. They showed that because of that political ideology, more of younger part of the electorate actually voted for them.
Yeah.
So
Uh, of today, what figures do you have on Ukraine efforts against the invasion? How many soldiers are fighting? How many have lost their lives defending their country? And what about the civil resistance in currently occupied territories? A topic rarely discussed. Now we are from Mariupol. This is occupied territory now.
it is an occupied territory now, unfortunately. So it is quite complicated to estimate the rough numbers of what happened, because the local news, the local morgues, they were giving the numbers up to 100,000 of people who died there. But however, international organization like OSCE or the UN estimation, they're giving up to 10,000 of people, but it cannot be that because the city was fully under the rubble. So it is either they're giving the lower numbers for a kind of statistics, or it is just complicated to observe the total number, and it will be possible to do only in case of the occupation and exhumation of the remains of the bodies of people, because lots of mass graves, and some people just died instantly, and it was impossible to identify the graves. But also I think that in general, in terms of losses, it is challenging to cover the exact figures, because there are different reports, and these reports can come from different sources, and plus it is a sensitive information. So I would say that all countries, all the sides, always historically they were lowering the number of losses of their armies, and they were exaggerating the number of losses to the troops of their military opponent, also to keep the military spirit on the go. But before the invasion, I also googled to give you a more precise number. So the Ukrainian armed forces had a count of 250,000 active duty personnel, but of course, we got the full mobilization. So Ukraine also mobilized the hundreds of thousands of additional troops. So estimates usually suggest that Ukraine has around 700,000 to 1 million personnel involved. And that also includes regular armed forces, but also territorial defense, or the units, or the volunteers. Plus, we receive substantial military aid from Western countries, and that all includes advanced weapon system, training, intelligence support. But there is no such information that has been publicly disclosed, the exact number of military casualties, because of course there always will be concerns over moral and over security. Uh, but of course, there is quite a brutal fighting. So I'm afraid that we will be able to estimate the total number of losses only after the end of war. And we need to take into account that some remains of the bodies, unfortunately, would not be identified. plus some losses of military people will be on the territory of the opponent, and some graves are mass graves, so probably some of them will still be not identified.
Yeah. The occupied territories are partisanship operations against the investors.
It's an interesting question because there is a kind of resistance movement. And recently, one big Ukrainian media released anonymous interviews with those who are taking part in that. And in some places, like Mariupol, for example, I know that people who stayed there, but they are taking part in kind of sabotage activities. They are drawing the letter of the Ukrainian alphabet, it's Y, and it became a sign of resistance. Some of them they do partisan activities depending on the region. Some of them are probably coordinating with the help of special operation forces. So it is not something that people can do openly, definitely, because that would endanger them. But there were reports about several regions where people, I think that mostly youth, till 35 years, they are active.
Yeah. I asked that because for the worldwide, it's important to know the the people that are living in in the occupied territories are fighting for his freedom. That's another Zelensky issue. That people are suffering in the in the arms of the Putin regime.
Lots of people fled the regions because, well, nothing was keeping them anymore. Plus, lots of people lost their property, so technically they have no place to return to. But with those who came back, I think it's polar, because I do not think that all the people support the current power authorities, but there is a matter of safety or the matter of practical reasons, because I know that they are rebuilding the cities, rebuilding, I mean, uh, and they are giving uh, apartments for free. Probably they will not be of the same size or of the same value, but anyway, from the practical stance, people survived bombing, so they need a place to live. They need to settle down. They have kids, and they're probably going to the school. So lots of people, I think, they are just silencing their views, or they call themselves apolitical. I do not think that there is a real term of being apolitical, but at least they are trying to demonstrate ignorance because they just want to have their peace. But of course, as always, as history is teaching us, there are some people who are rebelling against, and that's why we are seeing these things popping up on media or the news being spread through some other channels as well.
Yeah. There's much talk about the Russian regime propaganda efforts to manipulate international opinion, especially through the social media. However, little is said about their attempts with Ukraine. Could you elaborate on that or how Ukraine is managing those fake news or all this thing?
Well, I think that all the wars are hybrid wars these days, and while there are offensive and counter-offensives, we are also living in a digital world, so it all comes with different hacker attacks, but also with spreading the narratives that are working in favor of one or the other side. Of course, that often includes different provocations. For example, yesterday I saw the news on one of the online media of Ukraine, where it was said that some Russian sources were publishing the news that Ukraine was about to attack the nuclear plant station in one of the Ukrainian regions, and to accuse Russia of that. This is just one of the examples of how it can be used. But usually that includes the host trading with numbers of losses. It includes some kind of provocations, or there is the information about Ukrainian armed forces abandoning the occupied territories, or the rest of the population being negative about occupied territories coming back because they have a negative social perception of people who stayed there. And you can always play with these narratives. So it depends on the matter that you want to promote further. But I think that we are a relatively newly established country, and because of that, we are also still managing to work with the narratives and to get the counter propaganda mechanism to work out. Because being a part of a Soviet Union, well, I think that there are well-known international tactics that the USSR, former USSR, was using. So there was not much field to to dig on the on your own strategies.
Well, so be part of the yours that had let you the know-how to manage all the propaganda.
Or I think that some people will always be eating it, but at the same time, within the time when I'm talking to my colleagues or to my friends, they already know that they need to fact check everything. They need to check different sources of media. Probably it is more complicated with people of older generations, like my parents, my grandparents' generation, because they won't not living most of their life with digital resources. So if they see some news, they're taking that for granted. And you know how they had the habit to trust the television because that was the biggest source of information. And now it is more complicated to navigate because there are deep fakes, there is AI, there is user generated content, there is metadata. And of course, if I, or not me, but generally, you know, a person of my generation will approach the person of the generation of grandparents and will start explaining all the details about the AI and metadata. Well, the person will get lost. They are hardly dealing with a smartphone, and that would be a lot. But I think that raising awareness among young generation who will later be able to operate with these narratives, and in future in several decades will also be able to teach their kids or their grandkids media literacy. And this is probably something that people should focus on these days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, um, Bastiat, the French liberal thinker, said, "Where goods don't cross borders, armies will." He refers to the pacifying role of trade. Do you think this phrase still applies today, or does it need updating?
Well, I think that first of all, the underlying logic in this phrase is that basically that countries that are engaged in mutually beneficial trade are less likely to go into war because they will have a very vested interest in maintaining these peaceful relations. But I also think that these days the global economy is more interconnected than ever because there is all the trade, there is the investment, and plus there are supply chains that are being spanned over the continents. Um, I think that there are disruptions to trade already, but at the same time, it's also not black and white because, from one hand, there are some countries who still keep on trading with aggressor countries. I'm not speaking only in the context of Russia and Ukraine, but we are just talking about the international relations and foreign trade. But at the same time, those countries are also trying to keep more peaceful relationships. But there are different factors involved here. So, political, ideological, there can be also some territorial motivations, and then they can outweigh the economic considerations. And as such, I think that the use of sanctions that were put against the annexation of the Crimea and the ongoing war. It illustrates that economic measures can be employed in so-called lieu of direct military action, but also we can say that it can also sometimes play a very reverse effect because any country that is getting sanctions imply that it can also bring up some nationalist sentiments, and because of that it may not lead to any de-escalation or prevention of the conflict. There are always more interests involved, and the question is which kind of interests will outweigh in the end of the day. Some countries can have the trade today, and then the next day something will change, and there will be a matter of interest, the matter of power, the matter of territories, the matter of money spread it, across the globe, whatever, influence, and it's just a roulette. Which factor will outweigh?
Yeah, yeah. Liberalism is often scrutinized rigidly in the light of historical events. The Great Depression, through its clarified by authors like Rothbard or Milton Friedman, is not a father of liberalism. It still impacts the public perception of liberals. Consider Putin invasion of your country. Do you think this has affected liberalism or liberal movements in Ukraine?
I think yes, because first of all, it has reinforced the importance of such values that we can call it liberal. So, democracy, individual freedom, also the rule of law. So, lots of people, and it applies both to the Ukrainian population, but also to the to the international community, uh, that this is not just a fight for national sovereignty, but this is also a kind of fight of a liberal democratic society. And this is what we can often see in the news. We can also see all these repeated narratives both in Western media and domestic media. And of course, operating for this cause also became a significant matter for the public support of Ukraine's integration into Western institutions such as European Union. And usually these kind of institutions are seen as embodiments of the liberal values. But at the same time, there is a matter of rising nationalism, and I think that this interplay cannot be avoided because this is a factor of the collective psychology. Because sometimes it also presents tensions because from one hand it plays a unifying role because it brings up the national pride, it brings up the matters of defense of the culture, of language, of the identity, and this is an important part if people want to be resistant. At the same time, it can be compatible with liberalism because it is about defending a free and democratic society. But there can be tensions, so a temptation to prioritize national unity, security over individual rights. And then in a longer run, because one day the war will be over, but then the question is which kind of challenges it can bring and which challenges will be imposed to the liberal principles, whether it won't become an internal program. So that's why it is challenging these days. I would say that for Ukraine, the liberal movement will be to ensure that nationalism also will not become exclusionary or authoritarian someday. Um, but of course, there is always a matter of resilience, adaptation. So hopefully, it will not be the case.
Yeah. Do you foresee a future of expansion of liberalism in Ukraine once the war is won?
Well, I think that more yes than no, because first of all, as I mentioned before, it already solidified Ukraine's identity as a sovereign country that is committed to global democratic principles. So basically, At least on the paper, it should just enhance the defense of these values. So it should be a positive side of a coin. Then it is also about the human rights and also about the individual freedom, the freedom of choice, the importance of human rights. And it could be the stronger emphasis on protecting these rights in post-war country, because then it will help to bolster liberal movements that will be able to advocate for more civil liberties, for more justice in the country. Plus, if we already signed certain documents with the EU, then there is a demand for the European integration and liberalization as the consequence. So, in case if Ukraine still will aspire to join the EU, it should be a catalyzer for liberal reform. Plus, it will also provide the external observation from different institutions that will put, I don't want to say pressure, but it will keep track of in which direction the country will be going. And I think that taking into account that lots of aid was received and lots of efforts were being conducted since 2013 to get on a more Western path, it would be very unlogic to just ruin all the efforts and turn to a more radical way. But there can be some challenges because, as I said before, there is a kind of demand which is determined by the war, and in a sense, it is normal because here it can more bring people together on the psychological level, and of course, it can emphasize cultural integrity or territorial integrity. But my concern is whether it can be at the expense of some minority rights or some international cooperation, because these are also key liberal values. So there will come a challenge of ensuring that it won't be on the um exclusionary side. And in case if it still exists, and I think that it won't be something like, people will wake up and war is over and now they have some other issues, domestic issues to deal with, and they will be okay, we switch it off. No, because it will stay in the collective memory, it will stay as a generational aspect, and it will change maybe with some generations to come, and that is normal, and we can see it in history examples in different countries and different continents. But then it is necessary to ensure that it does not exceed but rather complements in a sense the main liberal democratic framework.
It's good to hear that.
Yeah.
Uh, in the Dominican Republic, our government has shown solidarity and support pro-Ukraine motion in the United Nations. Recently, the President Luis Abinader attended to peace conference in Switzerland on behalf of our country. While our state lacks of the industrial or economic capacity to support Ukraine military force, how can a Dominican citizen safely support humanitarian aid and reconstruction in Ukraine?
So, well, first of all, I think that Ukraine is quite far from the country. So it is necessary to first of all read about the context, about historical predispositions that form the situation as it is these days. But if someone wants to help some particular people or to donate, there are some official websites where one can do it. So, for example, they can do it at the website which is called supportukrainenow.org. I can drop the link after we have the conversation, so maybe you can pin it once you publish it. So it is the initiative that was created by some global shapers hubs in Ukraine, and it was supported globally. So first of all, you can see there the kind of social initiatives in Ukraine that needs international support. You can also sign up as a volunteer, and I know some people who are volunteering coming from very different regions of the world. You can see how you can host people in case if that is also necessary. You can see whether you can hire people if needed. You can see which post can help you on social media, or in case you want to donate or send humanitarian supplies, or maybe start a petition. You can also see that. Plus, usually the resources on that website, they are being allocated throughout different regions, and they're being allocated through different countries, so you can just see the information specifically for your country, and you can operate from there. Other than that, there are some international initiatives, like United 24. It is a presidential initiative, so you can be sure that in case if you donate something there, it will not be a scam. But other than that, I think that we all live in a kind of globalized community, and everyone, at least once in their lifetime, is meeting a person from the opposite side of the world. So just talk to your friends, talk to your acquaintances, ask, because sometimes maybe you will not do some like global, uh, country wise important contribution, but maybe you can support some of your friends. Maybe you can talk to them. This is also support. Maybe you can support their family. Maybe you can support them by seeing a broader perspective. So I think that there is nothing as important or non-important help these days. Just see what you can do, and that's pretty much it.
Okay. What message would you give to those who still do not grasp the importance of Ukraine's victory and respect for internationally recognized borders? Also, what source of information would you recommend for those seeking to stay well informed about events in Ukraine?
Well, I think that it is necessary to understand that all people were not choosing that. Unfortunately, there are things that are just happening. And Ukraine is fighting for its independence. It is fighting for the ability to keep going, for better opportunities for its citizens, and for the freedom to choose. But also these days it became the yard for the other countries that are neighboring. And I know that people are getting tired from the perspective of time, and this is normal. This is also a kind of spin. But people who stayed are also very tired. They are living that daily. They are waking up to air raid alarms, and they still have to function. They still have to go to work. They still need to perform their daily duties. They are still There are lots of young generation, and they also want to enjoy their 20s, 30s, whatever, and they have a huge responsibility. Many of them are providing for their families, fully becoming the only breadwinners in the family, all in all. And I know that there are lots of skeptics, especially towards refugees, in case if they come, because this job still in immigrants or something. A stereotype, I understand. Or the claims like we already did enough. Yes, no one denies that there was lots of help, and no one also denies that lots of people are doing amazing things domestically. But you can be very skeptical till something like this is knocking your door. And I think that people need to realize that. And in case if Ukraine is standing as a yard these days, and is also in a sense protecting the peace of the neighboring country, you know, to be able to do so, there is support needed, and people need to understand that. And generally, we are talking about simple human take. It is just that simple to be a human and to understand that there is someone who cannot continue their day because they are sitting in this hour, and it does not take that much to sympathize. It's not about being a beggar, but it is just being in a complicated situation, and that's it.
Yeah. About the information source.
uh, the information source, I will recommend reading some outlets that are available in English. Yeah, like you can always read Kiev, Post Kiev, Independent, because these are the
I
sources
follow.
that,
I follow Keep Independent. That's a
be-
that good reporting.
because you can find the information that is accessible for foreigners. It comes in English and in Ukrainian, so you can keep up with the news there. You can also keep up with the social media of this online media, so that you will stay posted because they are quite active in news reporting. Read some analysts who are on the ground, political analysts, military analysts, because usually these are those who understand the situation more in depth. And also there are people from Western countries who decided to come to the country. So if you want to see some fresh update, check their account, check what they post, check what they write. I think that it is better to read some analysis than to read some information that can circulate on more surface level. So just to stay tuned with the news.
Yeah. Keep independent. In uh
Independent. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I follow them in X,
Mm-hmm.
if before Twitter. uh, um, that may be a very personal question, but once the Ukraine achieves victory in fight for freedom, would you return immediately or take time to consider?
Um, I was trying to answer to this question for quite a while, um, and I still don't know what to answer. And for me, this is not the matter of whether I have a kind of views or not, but for me, this is a reason that, first of all, currently I also have family outside of Ukraine, and of course everything that will be happening in future needs to include them into the plans. Second of all, with the time you also start to settle down in a new place. You get social contacts, you get your friends here, you get established life there. And this is also a matter of how my life will look at that point when it will be possible to do so. Right now, I do not have any property to return to. So, in any way, it will be something rented. But the thing that I know for sure is that for me it is important to keep ties with the place that I initially come from, because it is a part of my identity as a person. So whatever the future will bring, whatever place I will live in, I dedicate part of my work to the case of what is happening in Ukraine. And I hope that it will be possible for me to maintain the ties in future as well. It doesn't matter whether in Ukraine or somewhere else.
Yeah. Sorry, but I knew that it's very personal, but it's important to people get to know the before statistics are people. There are not 6.5 million refugees. Yeah, that's a number. No, it's just not just a number. It's one person, each one.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that when people are seeing the stats and these are big numbers, these are just numbers. If you are in close touch with someone, then it is a personalized context, it is a personalized story. With my colleagues, when everything just started, we were covering some stories of people who were coming from the regions that were under the siege. And I cannot even partially express you how complicated it was to cover that. I don't know how it is perceived by the international community, because I am biased, of course, here. But when I was listening to the stories of how a girl who is 19 managed to get out of the city and her whole family was killed on the way, and she is getting in all the details with that, or the couple who were going through some blog posts, and they asked for the money to read them through, but they also took their wedding rings. And you are listening and listening and listening. And there are so many more war stories, and there are people, young people who are also new. They got missing, and no one knows whether something happened to them because it was all during the siege, or they just got out and they lost touch. And like this always very horrible. I am trying not to trauma dump on people, because I understand that uh, people in context will get me better, but also it is necessary to talk about that, because then it also helps to debunk the myth of, oh, another one job stealing immigrant came, or they're coming for compensations, or they're fleeing from something. No, with what is important to understand is that so many people who I know here and other people who got abroad, very talented people, and they were not running from poverty, they were running from war. And doesn't matter from how rich your country is, sometimes things are just happening.
From República Libre, we want to reaffirm our support for Ukraine defense of freedom, Tanya. Is there any message would you like to amplify in the future? Count on us.
I would just say keep yourself educated about the matters, try to understand local context but also international context, because everything is interconnected and everything is complex. Nothing is black and white here. And just stay tuned with the information. And as Republica Libre, I think that you guys are standing for democratic values and for individual freedoms as well. So keep doing the good job.
Slava Ukraine.
Героям слава!